are you, Flynn?
I'm great. Am I pronouncing it right? Is it Sherratt or Sherratt?
Sherratt.
Sherratt. Okay. How you doing?
I'm doing really good. I'll tell you a funny story about pronouncing my name when I was in Marine Corps boot camp. The drill instructor mispronounced my name, and I corrected him.
Uh-oh.
Your question is, how'd that go? Not too good.
Not too good. Oh, that is, I can only imagine.
Right after that, I discovered two things. It really matters how fast you get on and off a bus for some reason. And the second is, it really doesn't matter how they pronounce your name.
They're going to pronounce it how they pronounce it, and that's it.
Yeah, and you just don't bother with it. They'll catch on sooner or later.
All right, a couple things before we get started here, and thank you for agreeing to sit down with me here. I'm recording this call so I can go back and make sure I don't miss anything.
Perfect.
If I have some limitations on my recorder, however, and so I can only go about 15 minutes at a time. So if we get to the point where we've gone too far, I might need to call you right back. But I'll give you a heads up on that. All right. Like I told you when we called before, first of all, can you tell me your full name?
William Edward Sherratt, Sherratt.
Okay. And when is your birthday?
2/2/1942.
Perfect. Okay. And you live in New Bern, North Carolina?
Yes.
All right. With a beach house at Atlantic Beach?
Yes.
All right. Like we talked about when we talked Saturday, I'm writing a book on the history of the early Scouts in South Carolina, the early movement, and also, in particular, the history of Troop 10. Troop 10 was founded in 1951 at Eastminster Presbyterian Church. There were some prior troops to that, some prior iterations of Troop 10, but nothing that really stuck. So by the time, were you aware of any of the prior Troop 10s while you were a scout in Troop 10?
At other churches or other locations?
Correct.
No. I got into Boy Scouts at Troop 10 at First Presbyterian.
Okay.
Or Eastminster. Yeah, Eastminster.
Okay. And that would have been early 1950s, 52, 53, somewhere in that, if I'm correct?
Yeah, somewhere in that range, yeah.
Okay. And
I graduated from high school in 1960, and so I was in Columbia my freshman year and before, from about the 5th grade on.
Okay. And where did you go to school when you were in Columbia?
Hand Junior. Let's see. Wait a minute. Can't remember the elementary school, but Hand Junior High School and Dreer High School.
Okay. And tell me about, y'all lived on Academy Way, correct?
Yeah, Academy Way in Forest Hills.
Okay. And when y'all came to Columbia because your dad's job?
Yes.
And where y'all came from where? Where'd you move from?
Hang on a minute. Let's see. Columbia, South Carolina.
Was it Clinton?
Yes, it was Clinton.
Because I think I read that he was on the faculty there at Clinton, then he went into private practice
at Presbyterian College. Yes.
Right. Okay.
And he was both in the Army at Fort Jackson and also an engineer with Gerald Preacher.
Okay. All right.
I can't believe I'm remembering all this.
I know, it's bringing back a lot of memories. You're pretty good to remember all that. All right, and so you're in Columbia. You're at the scouting age, and you joined the troop at Eastminster. Now,
and if I remember correctly, the church then was a fairly small, very, very nice but very small church, and the scout troop hut was right straight behind it. I think later on they built the big church down the hill from that one.
Okay.
I think.
And you guys met in the scout building. I think I saw that building was built like 52 or 53, so that would have been right about the time, right before you got there. Tell me about that building.
Well, it was a scout hut. It was not anything fancy. I remember the closet very well because I was the bugler, and if I stood outside, I blew everybody away. So we put me in the closet, and I'd blow the bugle.
That's awesome.
But yeah, it was a big, great. If I remember correctly, it was a great big room. You walked in, and you walked in the side of it, and we had our meetings right there. It was big. It was pretty rough. I don't really even remember if anything. It was like knotty pine finish on the inside. It wasn't anything real fancy. It was a scout hut. And it was great.
That's the perfect building for scouts.
Oh yeah.
Do you remember how many people were in the troop and how y'all were organized at the time?
Good Lord, no, I don't remember how many were there. We were in patrols. I don't remember much about how many there were. In fact, it's very interesting because I'd be very interested in knowing who else was on that Eagle Scout plaque, because I can't remember names of people that I was particularly in Boy Scouts with. I remember some names of people that I was in school with in Columbia, mostly because I played sports with them or something like that.
I will send you a copy of the recharter paperwork that I have from 1955 and 1956 that lists you as a scout, and I think some of those names all the names are there. I'll send those to you.
Oh, you're great. That would probably, I'd probably remember a lot of them if I saw them.
Okay, perfect. I'll certainly do that. And did you guys when y'all met? What were your meetings like?
Very organized. I think, if I'm not mistaken, my father was either on whatever the board was, or was one of the assistant scoutmasters for a while. I don't know.
I believe that's accurate. So I know he's listed on.
So if he's around, it's very well organized. I can tell you the story where he was assistant scoutmaster here in Nebron when we were in high school, at Troop 13, and they made the Marine Corps look disorganized. But that particular troop was very well organized. The camping trips and stuff like that were very well done. Very well organized. If I remember correct, and I may mix some stuff up, but if I remember correctly, we had a trailer.
Okay.
And we had to load all our stuff out of the scout hut to go anywhere, and we'd load all this stuff up and go off wherever we were going. If I remember correctly, we used to go to camp at a camp called Camp Barstow.
Okay.
Now, very interestingly, I was a business consultant for 30 years before I retired with a company here in Raleigh, North Carolina called Capital Associated Industries. One of our clients was in Columbia, and I was down there one time to speak to their leadership team, and was riding down the highway, and for some reason, it looked like the place we used to turn to go to Camp Barstow. Well, I turned down it, sure enough it was.
How about that?
And I went to the camp. Now, it's changed a whole lot. You could pull down right next to chow hall. Now you can't. You're up park up at hut up above that. But I walked all down there, and that's where I was tapped into the Order of the Era.
Fantastic.
And I was tapped into the Order of the Era. This will kind of tell you who was in Boy Scouts back then. I was tapped into the Order of the Era by 2 or 3 members of the University of South Carolina football team.
Wow.
Who were Boy Scouts. And I remember one of them was Cooper Black. He would have been probably 2 or 3 years older than I was.
Okay.
But he was one of the counselors. But there were some guys on the ceremonial team. I later was on the ceremonial team with the Order of the Era, but in North Carolina. And I remember 2 or 3 members of that team were played on the South Carolina football team.
That's fantastic. All right. And then, so you guys went to camp. Did y'all go to camp every summer?
Yeah.
Okay. And what else do you remember about Camp Barstow?
I remember the waterfront. You had to have this little tag, and when you went down the waterfront, you took a tag from one side of this board and put it on the other. You had to have a buddy. And they, at the first of the week you were there, they'd have you do a swim test so they figure out whether you were going to drown or not. And if you couldn't swim very well, you went in one area that you could always touch bottom. If you could swim a little bit, you went in another area. These were finger piers. And so you'd move on out to where you could get to the end of the pier. And I forget how deep that was, but it was pretty deep because I was working on my swimming or life-saving merit badge, and we had to dive for a cement block and pull it up off the bottom. And so they set you up as to your swim level. You had a buddy. I never will forget this. And about every 10 or 15 minutes, the lifeguard would blow the whistle and they start counting to 10. And you had to get to your buddy and hold your hand up. Well, and they count all of you, and they count all the tags. And that's how they kept up with who was where, when, and whether or not you were still there.
I will tell you that is not very different from what goes on now. That is almost exactly the same. We still have we still have the paper tags that go from one board to the other. They still do the buddy checks periodically.
And I remember down on the waterfront was a big deal. The waterfront counselors were always messing around with something, and if I'm not mistaken, it was Cooper Black and one of his buddies bought a canoe from the camp and back then these old town canoes were canvas covered, and these guys bought this canoe and cut the canvas off of it and were fiberglassing it.
Really?
And that was fascinating to all of us to watch them doing that fiberglassing and drying it on there and how they had to color it and stuff like that and then cut the fiberglass. I mean, they did a first-class job of it, but I think that was all experimentation. Nobody quite knew exactly what they were doing. I remember the campfire for the regular campers. If you were facing the waterfront, it was to the left. And was down close to the water. And I remember for the night that they would do the OA tap, they went to great lengths to figure out how to set that up. And if I remember correctly, when I was tapped, the guys came in on canoes that were pulled in with fishing lines. There were guys sitting behind the campfire, and they reeled these canoes in from halfway out in the lake. And it was interesting because they put a pot, and I found this out later because I wound up on the ceremonial team. We did some of the same things. Put a pot of sand in front of this aluminum canoe and lit it on fire, soaked it with kerosene, lit it on fire, and one of the team members would be standing up in the canoe, and this canoe would mysteriously come in and then come right in the land, and they would step out on the land. That's how the tapping team got to us. And it was always fascinating to watch all this. And of course, they had no idea how they were doing it or anything else until after I got in. And the OA circle was different than the regular campfire circle. And if you facing the waterfront, it was way up in the woods to the left. And when I visited there a few years ago, I ran into one of the caretakers. And I told him who I was and told him why I was there, and he was quite fascinated by the fact I'd been there years before. And I asked him, I said, do you happen to know where the Order of the Arrow Circle is? He said, oh, yeah. He said, if you walk up that trail, you'll find it up there. He said they don't use it anymore. And I didn't know why or anything like that, or well, they didn't do OA anymore or didn't do it the way we did it or whatever. But you had to come back to Camp Barstow after the regular camp had closed down for the OA initiation. And that was a week long.
Wow. Okay.
And it was tough. I mean, you worked. I mean, it was tough from the standpoint of each initiated group had projects, and what we do is improve things in the camp. Yeah, so we would repair stuff, and if I remember correctly, once again, if you're facing the waterfront, kind of back behind you was this huge chow hall and the store. And I don't remember where the handicraft stuff was done, but if you were standing facing the chow hall and went to your left, all of the cabin sites were down to the left, and there were several cabins where you had double-deck bunks in them, and there were also campsites that were just Adirondack cabins. And that's, you know what I'm talking about?
I do. I'm intimately familiar.
Open front cabins, and they had double-deck bunks in them too, and had showers and all somewhere near there. But I was in cabins a couple of times, and then Adirondack shelters a couple of times too. I remember that.
So I'll tell you about those Adirondacks. The original, there was a fire at the camp, and it burned a lot of the old wooden Adirondacks. They rebuilt them with cinder blocks. They built cinder block Adirondacks. When I was a camper at Camp Barstow, I was in a cinder block Adirondack.
Well, now when was that fire?
I'd have to go back and look. It was early 70s.
Okay, so it was okay, yeah. I was going to say I didn't remember that.
Yeah, it was way after.
Was a forest fire came through there?
Something like that, yeah. And it burned a bunch of the Adirondacks and necessitated some of them be rebuilt. You know, and now that Camp Barstow closed in 1995, and they rebuilt it out on Lake Murray, and so now it's and the facility out there has Adirondacks that will actually sleep 12 to 16 scouts. They're all open front, same kind of deal. Really fantastic facilities for a scout camp. Really good. All right, so
is that camp still operating?
It is the Camp Barstow that you're referring to, where I was also a scout in the early 80s and late 70s. That camp was sold in 95 or 96. It's now operated as a Christian camp. When we get off the phone here, I'm going to send you a link to a YouTube video that I did about a year and a half, maybe 2 years ago, when I took a tour of the old Barstow. Kind of went out. I went same thing you did. I found myself out that way and turned down the road, and sure enough, came across it. And
yeah, if I remember, there was a sign out on the if I remember correctly, it was a dual lane highway.
That's right.
And I was going between Columbia and somewhere that a client had a location. I can't remember the company's name, but I was going between there, and I think I saw, and I think the sign's kind of there's a trailer park right there.
Right.
Yep. Okay, I'm remembering the same thing.
Awesome. All right. Now that summer camp, did y'all take monthly camping trips or periodic camping trips during the year?
Yeah, I think we did. Yeah.
Do you remember any of the places that you went?
No.
Okay. Now, how about did the troop or anybody in the troop ever go to any of the high adventure opportunities like Philmont? The Philmont started in the 1930s. Was that a part of anything that y'all ever did?
All right, let me think a second, because kind of interesting. My brother and I had an opportunity to go to whichever one we wanted, the National Jamboree or Philmont.
Mm-hmm.
My brother picked Philmont, but I have no idea when.
Okay.
And I went to the National Jamboree when it was at Valley Forge. And I was a senior in high school here and was not a part of a troop. I was on the council. I worked at Camp Charles and Camp Croatad, who were both Boy Scout camps, in the summer. because we moved from Columbia to Jacksonville, North Carolina, from Jacksonville, North Carolina, to Swansboro, North Carolina, because Daddy was at Camp Lejeune and Cherry Point, and then from Swansboro to Nebern. And I was never in a troop in Nebern, but everybody that was in troops in Nebern knew me because I was a camp staff all of the years I was in high school, because Nebern, Swansboro, and Jacksonville all went to the same place. And I was in a troop in Jacksonville when I went to Valley Forge no, it was Nebern. I was not in the troop, but I was in Nebern and got to go to Valley Forge.
Tell me about your experience there. What was that like?
Oh, it was great. I will never forget this. We were in a campsite. Obviously, and there were probably, good Lord, I don't know how many of us were in the campsite. But we had 2 Marine gunnery sergeants with us that were Boy Scouts. And one of them's idea of fun was to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning and walk around belting out, "Oh, what a beautiful morning, oh, what a beautiful day," at the top of his lungs. And, of course, you didn't dare talk back to him. So everybody was up at exactly the same time with this clown running around singing, "Oh, what a beautiful morning." If I could have found him when I was a Marine, I would have taken care of him. But, yeah, it was great. The huge amphitheater that we met in was just gigantic. Had all kind of patches and neckerchiefs from there, and I mean it was just gigantic. I remember the tours and some of the historic buildings at Valley Forge that we had events at those, and it was just spectacular. I mean, met a ton of people.
That's fun. It's a lot of fun. You know, my son went to the 2017 Jamboree at the Summit Reserve that's up in West Virginia, and I went to the 1981 Jamboree, which was at Fort A.P. Hill in Virginia.
Yeah.
So I can relate to the fun that you have at the Jamboree. Tell me about you. You mentioned that you moved. Do you remember when you left Columbia?
Okay, back up from 1960. I went through my freshman year at Drew High School, played junior varsity football, and we left after my freshman year. I think my father accepted a job with the engineering division at Camp Lejeune.
Okay.
And later he retired, both as an Army Bird Colonel and a GS-16 at Cherry Point. He was the top civilian at Cherry Point when he retired.
Wow.
And so he moved from Public Works at Camp Lejeune to Public Works at Cherry Point, and he took over, I think, assistant director at Cherry Point, and then became director.
Fantastic. All right, how about you?
Yeah.
When you graduated from high school, then what did you do?
I graduated from Nebern High School.
Okay.
And graduated in 1960. I was here for 1 year.
Okay.
And our senior class still gets together twice a year. People fly in from California, from all over everywhere. It's a very cohesive crowd. And we still stay in communication with each other. But I was there only 1 year at Nebern High School.
And did you go to college?
And that didn't bother me. We moved. I used to jokingly say when I was speaking to leadership teams, how your family impacts who you are and what you are. And I said, in our family we moved. Almost got what was almost like, he's made 2 friends. Get him out of here. And so yeah, we moved a heck of a lot. And I graduated from Nebern High School, attended North Carolina State University, Atlantic Christian College in Wilson, North Carolina, and enlisted in the Marine Corps, and did that, and was enlisted and then commissioned, and got out of the Marine Corps and went to work for Fortune 500 companies, and was hired by a company down here, because I always wanted to get back east. I was hired by a company down here as the vice president of one of the major security companies, and was there for 4 years, and then was hired away from them by someone that I knew in Raleigh very well, was Capital Associated Industries, and the president and CEO and I knew each other very well, and was with them for 29 years.
Wow. That's fantastic. And you retired from Capital Associated Industries?
Yes.
Wonderful. All right. How about your family? Tell me a little bit about your family. You got married, and I know you have.
Yeah, I got married. That didn't work out so well, so was single for a number of years, and then got married again. And have one daughter with my first marriage, and she's very successful. You talked to her, I think.
I believe I did.
She called me the other day after you talked to me. I said, "What are you giving my name out to strange people for?" And she says, "That was strange."
Well, I sure do appreciate it.
I told her that I ascertained that you probably weren't strange, and it was very good, and that I was absolutely tickled to death to have gotten the opportunity to talk to you. She said, "Well, he kind of convinced Mark and I he was for real, so we told him where you were."
Well, I sure am glad they did. I really do appreciate that. Are there any other? You mentioned your brother. Are there any other scouts in your family?
Well, Daddy was, I was, and Tom was. Tom was Boy Scout. I can't remember much at all about that. I know he was in troops in Nebron. He was in Troop 13 here, which is a Centenary Methodist church, and back then had 175 to 200 members. I mean, it was huge.
Yeah, that's a big
And when they used to come into camporees and stuff like that, they would come in 2 or 3 school buses they bought, and would set up in a wagon wheel formation with a huge pyramidal tent in the middle that the Scoutmasters were in, and then this wagon spokes going out where all the patrols. And it was the most organized thing, and they wiped out all the competitions. And probably 10 guys in my graduating class were all in Troop 13 and are on the plaques that's sitting there now. And that troop is a very small troop anymore. And at the time it was that large. They had some like 8 Scoutmasters. My father was one of them, and a retired Marine Bird Colonel was the Scoutmaster, and Charlie Taylor. And the guy that worked with Daddy was one of the Sister Scoutmasters, Needham Crow, and he was with Southern Belle. So when they landed at the camporees, first thing would happen was Needham Crow would find a pole, he'd drop the telephone line to the pyramidal tent. So here they are at a camporee with telephone, electricity from a generator, and their favorite thing was right next to the entrance to the pyramidal tent, they would bury, and then of course all the patrol members are setting this tent up for the Scoutmasters. They're just kind of directing traffic. And they ran it like a Marine battalion, and the kids loved it. I mean, it was discipline. They had fire watches and night patrols. And there were 2 people, and they alternated. So somebody was constantly walking all the campsites, okay, as fire watch and as a watch. Then they'd alternate, and they had all this stuff organized. My brother used to talk about that, but that's I was not in, and I was never in that troop. They would show up at camp where I was working in bunches, and of course, so I knew all of them and knew who they were, but I wasn't in the troop itself. I don't know why I didn't do that.
So your brother's younger than you?
Oh yeah.
How much younger is he?
He's 4 years younger than I am, so he's 74.
Okay, so
he's a psychologist.
So he never would have been in a scout in Columbia then. So he got in scouting when
No.
Yeah.
He was
okay.
The thing I remember about him in Columbia was he went to Heathwood Hall.
Okay.
Does that sound familiar to you?
It does. Still here.
He went to Heathwood Hall, and he had to take a foreign language as a first grader.
Wow. Okay.
Nowadays, they give him Spanish, it'd help.
That's right. So if was he an Eagle Scout, your brother Tom?
I think he was, yeah.
How about your dad? Was he an Eagle Scout?
He was life.
Life. Okay. All right.
Because he used to. Oh, I've got his merit badge sash somewhere, and he used to tell Tom and I both, you two characters gonna do it better than I did.
There you go. I've told my son the same thing. Even though I got my eagle, I said you're going to get yours. All right,
I got God and Country. We both got that.
Okay.
Got all the merit badges.
All right.
Tom was never tapped into the Order of the Era.
Okay.
I was. Wound up on the ceremonial team. Tapped my father into the Order of the Era.
All right.
I was on the ceremonial team when he was at Camp Croatan, which is down here. Camp Charles is near Wilson, North Carolina, which is probably 90 miles from here. And Camp Croatan was right down here on the Neuse River, down from Newbern. And the camps, well, they'd run Camp Charles for the first part of summer, and then pack up everything and move it to Camp Croatan for the second half of the summer. And so staff and everything would, and all the equipment and everything else would move. And so Daddy came to Camp Croatan with some Troop 13 guys, because they come in packs, and there was a Scoutmaster with them wherever they were. And wherever they were, and there was a Scoutmaster, they did what they were told, when they were told, the way they were told. And they were good guys. And so it was very interesting. So I got to tap my own father into the Order of the Era and initiate him into the Order of the Era.
That's fantastic.
I had to do it.
So we're talking about camp, and you mentioned a couple times. You said when you went to the jamboree, there were patches and neckerchiefs. You mentioned some that you had your dad's merit badge sash. Tell me about that. Were you a collector or anything during your time? I know that's a big thing now.
Well, I was some of the time, and some of the stuff I've still got, and some of it I don't. Heck, I've got my eagle pin and my card somewhere. My mother saved it, but I don't know where I've got it stuck. We have had kind of an interesting history here. I don't know whether Floyd, affected you guys or not that much, but it certainly affected us. We had 2.5 feet of water in our house.
Oh, wow.
And so that got everything. I mean, we just came in here, except for the upstairs. We came in here and just took everything out. They stripped the whole house up to 8 feet high and completely rebuilt it. Now, we picked the whole house up 7 feet in the air, so it's pretty much bomb-proof now. The water got so deep it killed our generator. And we got all new generator, all new air conditioning, everything. So stuff has moved around and been stored and everything else. I don't know where half this stuff is yet.
Well, that is those are fun things to have. And I'll throw this out to you. I was thinking about it as you just said that. Should you locate that pin, and should you be so inclined, I would love to display it in our new building that we're going to get built here next year, as the first Eagle Scout from Troop 10. You were the first Troop Eagle Scout from Eastminster. Not sure you were. I'm not sure you realize that, but yes, you are the first.
Well, I can't remember whether my court of honor was in the new church. I went to a court of honor in New Church. That was probably for somebody else, and I just was an Eagle Scout and was invited there or something.
I'm gonna when I send you the list of the troop, I'm gonna send you the newspaper clipping from that court of honor. Okay. Because I have it.
Wow.
And I believe that it was at Eastminster. Now, was
it up in the old church? I remember distinctly. I mean, I can picture it. It was fairly small. It was kind of like a chapel. It was just. And in fact, I sang in the choir. If I'm not mistaken, my mother probably shoehorned me into that because I can carry a tune in a bucket, but she decided that was something I ought to do. And I remember in that old church, the pulpit was, you walked in the back, and the pulpit was up in the front, obviously, and the choir sat to the left of there.
That is neat. I've only seen pictures of that building. But now that we've
and
talked,
I can tell you a funny story about the new church. When they built the new church, I forget who the organist was, but he was just fantastic. Okay, so to get in the new sanctuary, of course, they got a brand new organ. That sucker was powerful. I mean, it was great. My father sang in the choir. And he'd sing in the choir periodically, so he'd be there sometimes and sometimes not. He was sitting with us. This organist was so creative. I mean, he'd be in the middle of a hymn, and you'd come to a break, and he'd take off, running up and down the scales and everything else, and my father would go, "Will you play the hymn?" I don't remember the guy's name, but he was a fantastic organist. Just drive my father nuts.
Oh, that's funny. You mentioned the Court of Honor. Do you remember anything about how Court of Honors were conducted and what it was like to go through the Eagle process?
All right, if I remember correctly, it was 3 or 4 people. And you appeared before. I mean, they'd ask you questions, and you'd give them answers.
Okay. And they would.
And I don't remember who they were. I'm sure Scoutmaster was one of them, but probably somebody from the what do they call the ruling body of the troop now?
Well, there's the troop committee, and then troop committee. Then there's the council, and so we're now the.
Well, the council is the statewide organization, isn't it?
That's right. That's correct.
Because here it's Eastern North Carolina Council of Boy Scouts of America.
Right.
And whatever it is down there, but there was somebody from the church committee and somebody from the council, and I mean it was a bunch. You got ready for that, and they ask you questions and you give them answers, and it was never a terrible experience, but for at that age it was somewhat intimidating at first, because that's the first time you obviously ever done that sort of thing.
Right. And I think it's intentional that you have to interact with adults as a youth. It's one of the ways that you're prepared for adult leadership.
Oh yeah. I mean, it was a great thing. I'm not saying that. I just was remembering. It was kind of a daunting task to appear before that, and I don't know whether they told you then you made it or you found out later. I don't remember. But I apparently made it.
Well, was earning the Eagle rank a big deal in 1955, 1956?
Oh yeah. To be an Eagle Scout was something else. You knew who in Washington had been an Eagle Scout. You knew who in the military senior commanders had been Eagle Scouts. It was almost always, if you were head of a company or very senior in the company, you knew whether they were Eagle Scouts or not. It was a big deal. And I think, as I told you the other day, football players, the folks who were popular on campus were Boy Scouts. And that was looked up to, not looked down on, and certainly nobody picked at it. And because, a lot of football players were Boy Scouts, and that's kind of what you did.
That's great. I'll let you know that in Troop 10 these days, we've got a lot of the most popular, the best, the top echelon of the kids that are in high school, the athletes, and as well as the honor roll students, and sometimes they're both. But they participate in scouting, and that's not entirely different in our troop these days. And I'm so happy to hear that.
Well, I think that's a testament to the church and to the adult population of that church staying focused on the right things.
I would agree with you there. I want to wrap this up. We've been going about 45 minutes here, and I think I could probably talk with you for a good hour or two. But what's your biggest takeaway from your scouting experience?
From the whole thing?
Yes, sir.
Well, the things that it taught me, the the sense of accomplishment that it instilled in you, that it was worth your while doing the right thing. It was worth your while working for something. It was worth your while being something, and I give my mom and dad all the credit for that, because they worked me hard and pushed me hard as they did my brother, and I'm thankful for it, because I've accomplished some things in my life, and so has my brother. He's done a great job, and so the scouting experience was just a part of that, learning discipline. Learning interaction with other people, learning social skills, all of that, and it was a powerful thing. But the accomplishment thing, the getting merit badges and working hard to obtain something, and then in fact seeing it, and the church, it was so powerful to see the adults support all of that. It was never not an important program in the church. It was a big deal in the church, and I think that's critical to this. I had a very interesting experience in Raleigh, North Carolina. We were members of a church there, I won't name the name, and they had Scout Sunday, and the Scouts came, and there weren't many of them. I remember that. But we were living in Raleigh, and at the time, we intended to stay in Raleigh for a number of years, which we did 26 years. And after the service, when we were leaving, I walked up to one of the Scoutmasters, and I said, I'm an Eagle Scout, and I would love to help you some if you ever need any help as an assistant Scoutmaster. He looks at me with a perfectly straight face and says, well, we've got plenty of Scoutmasters, thank you.
That's unbelievable.
Oh, yeah. It was unbelievable, and we left that church probably 2 months later and moved from that Presbyterian church to the Baptist church, where we've been ever since, Bailey Baptist Church, and then First Baptist Church down here, because I entered a very interesting program in Raleigh. I don't know whether you have it in Columbia, called Bible Study Fellowship, BSF. I'm not familiar with that. Huge in Raleigh, on the nights. It runs concurrent with the school year. So you meet on Monday nights, and there were 600 men in our group, 600 women in the Baptist church right near us. But there were 6 of those groups going in Raleigh the same night, and it was a 2-year waiting list to get into the program. Wow. And it was 8 years long, and it was the most life-changing thing I ever went through. But faith piece of Boy Scouting was very, very open and very out there when I was a Boy Scout. That was good stuff, and it was okay stuff, and that's good. I agree. I cannot tell you how excited I am to talk with you, how honored I am to talk with you. Well, I thank you so much, and the honor is mine, believe me. Well, I had no idea that I was in the first group of Eagle Scouts, or I was the first Eagle Scout. You were the first Eagle Scout at Eastminster Presbyterian Church. Wow, I never knew that. Well, that is the truth. That is what the research has borne out. There was one other gentleman listed on our plaque who was a year ahead of you, but through the research in this book, I have determined that he was actually a member of Troop 1, and that somebody in the council office, when they were entering in, added a 0. So he's now off, and you are the first one. Oh, that's interesting. Wow. So I will send you these things that I've promised you. The link to the video I'm going to send you right now. Is this a cell phone, or is this a landline that I'm talking on right now? No, this is a landline. Okay. I don't do text. I talk to people. Okay. All right. That's a dying art. It sure as heck is. All right. If I have any follow-up questions, is it okay if I call you back? Oh, absolutely. No, I would. This has just spurred my interest. Now, I told Cindy after the conversation that sometime we need to hop in the car and drive to Columbia. I would love to do it and be there on a Sunday and go to Eastminster to church again. Well, we would love to have you. If you let me know when you're coming, I will make sure that we roll out the red carpet for you. You don't have to do that. Well, but we do. Well, we'll go back to that heathen Presbyterian church one time.
I would love to have you as a guest at the church on a Sunday service, and the church is still very supportive of our troop and of scouting in general. We're very healthy. Our troop has 115 scouts. The Cub Scout pack has a similar number. So we've got scouts from a time.
Was there a Cub Scout pack when I was a Boy Scout?
There was not. The pack did not come around till later.
Okay, because my brother would have been in the Cub Scout pack probably. Right. My mother was a den mother, but I don't know where.
Right.
I don't remember.
That must have been after you went to North Carolina, because there was not a Cub Scout pack until later on.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So, again, I just want to thank you so much for your time today. This has been fantastic. I cannot wait to put this together and share the information with not only our scout leaders, but also with our church family. I think that the church would like to hear your recollections of Eastminster from those times. This has been wonderful. I think that this is the recollections, the things that you've said about the old church and the way things were, are going to be very well received by a lot of people. And I'm so grateful for your time today.
Well, thank you so much, and it's been great talking to you on the phone. I hope I have the opportunity sometime to meet you in person.
Well, I would love to have you down here at the church, and I'd love to have you come talk to the troop one day, maybe during a Court of Honor, assuming that we can ever get back and meet as a group. You know, they're limiting us right now to 10 people. I think they're about to expand it so we can get 25 together, but I told you we got 115 people, so that's kind of tough.
Yeah, this is a mess, and I hope we get on the other side of it, and I think we've got to get to the other side of it. The Lord's in charge, we're not, and I'm fine with that relationship.
Exactly. Thank you so much. I'm going to send you these things. If you can see if you can track down a picture, I'd be very grateful for a picture. If you're so inclined and you're looking for a place to where that eagle pen might show up in a place of honor, I would love to be the custodian of that. And we're trying to build a new building. We're trying to build a scout hut. We've been meeting in the church for a long time, since they tore that building down in the mid '80s.
Don't make it too fancy.
No, absolutely not. It's going to be a very rough building with not very finished at all. But so we've got ribbons and awards and all kinds of things that we need a place to display. And so
why don't you do this? Why don't you scare up about 2 or 3 contractors out of the church and scare up the funds and let the contractors help the scouts build the building?
That's a fantastic idea. And as soon as I get there's a lot across the street that the church owns, and we are in the process right now of trying to convince the church to give us a long-term lease on the one corner of that lot to build this building. And
you could have these contractors bring in who needed to pour the foundation, pour the footings and stuff like that.
Yep.
And then where these boys could build this darn thing, building the walls and everything else. Imagine how powerful that would be if and you got 2 or 3 of these contractors to lead it and guide it. They teach these guys a bunch. It'd mean a whole lot to them, and it probably wouldn't cost quite as much.
You're exactly right. We've got all kinds of help available to us in the troop, and I'm excited about it. We just got to get the church to agree to let us use the land. So that's what we're working on.
There you go.
Thank you so much, Bill. I appreciate your time today. This has been so much fun for me, and I will look forward to talking with you again at some point in the future.
That's great. Thank you so much.
Thanks. You have a great one. Bye.
Talk to you later. Bye.